Hello and welcome to the Geckoland podcast. I'm kidding, I don't have a podcast, but my first stream was yesterday, so I don't know what I'm doing. I just got my new mic and it sounds like a podcast mic because it sounds really good, so yay. But anyways, welcome back to Geckoland, where I make informative videos about leopard geckos with my two lizards, Mushu and Ash. In today's video, we will be covering the difficult subject of Enigma Syndrome. My older gecko, Ash, actually does have very mild Enigma Syndrome. I'd show some videos of her having symptoms, but I usually put away the camera if I notice it, because sometimes the camera doesn't really help with her stress, so I don't really have any footage of it, but today I'll be going over the symptoms and how to minimize it as much as possible. Let's get started. Enigma Syndrome, or ES, is a non-curable neurological disorder present in some geckos that causes issues in the balance and cognition of affected geckos. There is an Enigma morph, and most geckos who are born as this morph will have Enigma Syndrome. However, they don't have to be an Enigma morph to have Enigma Syndrome. A good example of this is actually Ash. She's just a common leopard gecko, but she does have Enigma Syndrome. Now let's go over some of the symptoms of Enigma Syndrome. If your gecko shows one or two of these, it doesn't mean that they have Enigma Syndrome, but these are just things to look out for. Stargazing, head tilting, inability to catch prey when it's directly in front of them, death rolls, seizures, circling, and just walking around wobbly or acting disoriented in general. Some of these can be from other disorders or just how they're born. For example, inability to catch prey can mean that they have bad eyesight, or even that they were just born a bad hunter. So this doesn't automatically mean they have the syndrome. Now let's get into the science of it. I don't want to talk too much about this because for people who haven't learned this yet, it might not make sense, or it might just be boring, so I'll skim past this real quick. Leopard geckos have 19 pairs of chromosomes. Each lizard has 2 copies of each allele. Only one dominant gene is required to cause symptoms. Enigma is inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern. Affected geckos are either heterozygous or homozygous dominant. Those who have big A, or big A, little a genes are affected. Homozygous recessive animals with little a genes are not affected as they do not carry the mutant allele and cannot pass it on to their offspring. Most geckos who have the syndrome are heterozygous little a. So in many cases of homozygous dominant genotype, big A is rare and usually results in a miscarriage. The syndrome is inherited, so at least one of the gecko's parents will have Enigma Syndrome. One gender isn't more likely than the other to have this disorder since leopard geckos don't have sex chromosomes. Okay, I hope you enjoyed your science lesson. Let's move on to what an Enigma morph will usually look like. They are known to have lighter skin color, especially their tail, and their spots are a lot smaller than a normal leopard gecko. They do look very pretty, so that's why a lot of people started breeding them with pretty much every morph, just to see what it would come out as, and they just don't care that they have a neurological disorder anymore. They just sell them because they're pretty, and people like them, which is not really good. Other than that, they look pretty similar to common leopard geckos, but if it's severe enough, it would be pretty obvious that they're having trouble walking straight. If your gecko has the syndrome, there's one known way to calm their symptoms. This is simply by reducing their stress as much as possible. Stress in a leopard gecko can be caused by many things. It could be if you handle them too often, too little, or too roughly. It could be by their environment. Some geckos prefer lots and lots of hide, but for others, too many hides can make them freak out and have trouble getting around their tank. Maybe you sprayed their tank and they don't like it wet. It all depends on your gecko. You have to experiment with your gecko's preferences and notice when their symptoms go up and down. What they seem to like and not like, every gecko is different. For Ash, especially when her tank gets really messy, she gets stressed and starts to display symptoms, but when I do the best I can to decrease her stress, her symptoms completely disappear because it's that mild for her. I'm not an expert, so I can't tell if your gecko is Enigma or not if you send me a picture of them, And I'm also not an expert in leopard geckos in general. My channel is just about the research I've done and from my experience with lizards, so I don't have all the info in the world about Enigma Syndrome, but I feel like someone who's reliable, who has a whole series about Enigma Syndrome and has quite a few geckos with neurological disorders, is Jessica's Animal Friends. So if you'd like to learn more about Enigma Syndrome and hear from her experience, you should definitely go check out her channel. I'll have her video linked in the description. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, or if you didn't, you can leave a dislike. This is just so I know what kind of videos to make in the future. Have a nice day, night, or afternoon, or whatever time it is for you, and I will see you guys next week with another video. Bye!